Hey guys, it's Steph here with Crafty Ladybug. Today's lesson is going to be on Santa's sack. This goes along with the Christmas series of Rudolph the Deer. This is already on my channel. You will find it listed as a whitetail or reindeer. It's also underneath the Christmas playlist. The sled is also on my channel, the 3D sled, which is in a 3-part series, but you can create that gorgeous sled also to go along with your reindeer. And then Santa, if he's not already on my channel, he will be very soon. But here is a sort of three-dimensional Santa. He's got his fluffy little coat behind him and hair on the back of his head. Cute little glasses, and then the sack that we're working on today. And the sack I have filled with a little teddy bear. If this isn't on my channel, it will be very soon. The little ducky, rubber ducky, is currently on my channel. Baseball bat and a baseball glove filling up the little sack, and then a little toy boat inside there also. All of these items are currently on my channel, and if you search for those, you will find them. But let's get started with the sack. Today's sack, we're going to be using about 212 green rubber bands, and we're going to need about 20 gray rubber bands. The green will be for the actual sack itself, and then the gray is for a layer that's going to be right in here. Our loom is going to be set up in the straight configuration, the pegs being straight together. Air is going from left to the right, and your center bar is taken out. What we're going to be doing is filling up the inside. Our very first step is going to be to take two rubber bands, and we want to place those on the third peg from the top and just let those dangle there for a moment. Our next set will be to take two rubber bands, and we're going to come all the way down the loom 7 times with two rubber bands. So we're just going to move our way down the loom, 2 rubber bands each time, and make sure we come down 7 times. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this one makes 7. After the 7th one, we're going to turn and we're going to cover this area up right here. And then we're going to take 7 rubber bands and come back this way. And I'm just going to push those down slightly. And I start mine off a little bit different than most people probably do when they work on this type of a project. So just go along with me and you won't have any problems. But there's our 7th one coming back towards the left side. And where you had these 2 bands down here just sort of dangling and hanging out, you want to grab those with your hook and place it on the end of that peg right there. Now our next step is going to be to loop this shut. It's going to be a little bit difficult to begin with because we're going to be working in an odd direction. So I want you to take your loom and I want you to turn it just a little bit so that our starting point is right up here. It's now on the right side of us. We're going to reach into that peg, and we're grabbing those 2 bands and we're going to loop them over to the left. Remember, I said I do mine a little bit differently than most people when they do this type of looming. I like the way that it gives the chain look. This is giving that chain look, nice clean look right around the lip of the bag. We're going to reach into this peg on the left, and we need to grab the 2 bands on the bottom, and this is where it gets a little tricky. We're pulling those back down towards our body. It's an odd movement, and we only have to do this through all of these on this left side now. So we're just going to reach in, pick them up, and as I said, it does get a little tricky because they don't like to be on the loom this way, and we don't like to typically loom in the opposite direction either to loop. So once we get all those done, and we get off this one side, things will be a little bit easier. This is going to be a very similar technique to the witch's cauldron that I did at Halloween time. The design's based off of that. So if you've done the witch's cauldron, you'll kind of see similar techniques. Now I'm here at the bottom, and this one we're just going to push back those bands and loop it over to the right. And now we're going to loop up the right side, which this is our more natural way of looping. If I say loop or loom, sometimes I say both, but we're just going to loop straight forward till we get to the top. And now we've reached our top band, which looks kind of weird, looks like a triangle. You do still want to reach into that second peg down from where you started and grab those 2 bands and come forward. And that is going to link all of our first row in and on itself. Now we're going to turn our loom again, and we're going to lay a single band right on top all the way around. Now I know that you guys are pretty familiar with this technique, so I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about it. We're just going to lay our bands around. I like to work the same direction all the time. Some other designers, it doesn't bother them to work sort of out of order, but I've got a little bit of OCD, so I like to keep mine going in the same direction. But it doesn't hurt if you want to just lay them all around. And now that we have that first row done, it's going to be just like this. You should have used 16 bands there. And we're going to count real quick just to make sure. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And that is our math lesson for today. I can count to 16. Hoot, hoot. Okay, so our next step is going to be to pull over our bottom set of bands and flip them over. I am just going to start right here, grabbing those bottom 4 bands and going to flip it over. Bottom 4 bands, because we have 2 from each set of loops, and flip that right over. You want to be very careful that you're not grabbing your bands from the top portion as you flip those over. Just making sure you've got your 4 bands and very softly flip them over. And I do know right here I have just made a boo-boo. I pulled too many over, and I can see it now because it only left 1 on there, so I'm just backing up. And I want to make sure, you want to make sure that you're leaving 2 bands on each one of these pegs. There we go, 2 bands. And my 2 bands there. So you want to make sure that you've got 2 bands left on your peg after you've done your pull over. And then I'm just going to turn, and I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Being careful that you keep 2 bands on the loom on each peg at all times. And I'm struggling with this today. If you guys followed along with my witch tutorial, you know that this is not my favorite type of looping. I don't really like this technique that much. I mean, I think it's great, and I think it turns out well. I just don't like the movement of it. Personal preference. Nothing against any other designer that does this type of creations. It's just not me. I prefer things like the Santa to build things straight on the loom, or the sled. The sled was a lot of fun. Okay. Now I'm on my last one, and just going to flip over. Okay, so there's row number 1 and 2. Now for row number 3, we're going to switch, and we're going to do gray. I just went gray in there to do a gray band around, and then at the very end we're going to run some extra gray bands through there. I don't know if you can see it, but that's kind of like the cinch to the sack. It'll tighten up the sack more easily. So we're just going to take our gray bands, and we're going to go right around 16 bands. Just keep it going around. And then we're going to loop that over. And then we're going to switch back to green again. And I'm almost done with my gray. Now we'll just loop over again. And as I said before, you guys are used to looping over. You want to leave 2 bands on there. And loop those over. Do the side over here. Hoping to fast forward that, but if I forget to, you can see I struggle with this. Okay, that was row number 3. Row number 4 is going to be green again. Push that down. Row number 4. And then we're just going to flip row number 4 over. So it'll be our gray ones coming over. Side, bring our gray over. Okay, and now we're going to extend out, and we will extend out to 20. So we're going to take and we're going to move from 16 pegs up to 20. So we need to make room for 4 pegs. We're adding 4 more groups. So there's going to be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So I want you to take on your left peg. We're going to reach in and grab that band and move it over once. We're going to reach in here and we're going to grab the band on top. Actually, yep, we're just going to move that over to there. Then we're going to do the same thing on this end. We're going to grab that top band and move it over. And whatever band is here on top, and move it over. And that's going to give us 20. So our next part will be to take and lay our 20 bands around. And we're going to need to do the 20 bands around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. So you're going to need to do this part 5 more times, laying your bands around to 20. And you need to make 5 rows, and then we'll come back and we'll restart and we will have our 5 rows of 20 done. Okay, so we got our 5 rows of 20 done, 20 bands around, and you needed to make 5 rows of those. And here I have already continued the flip over loop. Our next step is going to be to reduce. And to reduce, we're going to go down to only needing 18 bands around. So what I want you to do is to pick up a set right here, and I want you to move it back 1 peg. Lay those 2 bands on top. And then our next step is going to be to take the 2 bands that are underneath and flip those over right there. We're going to need to do the same procedure on this opposite end here. I'm going to grab these 2 bands that are there, pull them off that peg, place it on the peg behind it, those 2 bands right there. And I'm taking the bands that are underneath, the 2 bands that are underneath. I'm just going to flip that over. And that is going to reduce us down to 18 pegs. I'm going to count again real quick to make sure I've done that properly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and this will make 18. So now we can lay our 18 bands around and flip over those 18 bands. And nothing hard about this. Same thing that we've been doing. So if I'm going faster, you guys are, I'm sure, pretty used to this because it seems everyone is making their creations this way. I had to take a small break from looming for a little while because I had actually gone back to work at a full-time job, and then I had a part-time job, and I'm kind of behind times on this style of designing, so I'm just keeping it simple with my little sack. So here I have my 18 around, and I'm just going to take my bottom 2 and flip those over on all of those 18. And if some of you are working faster than me, we're going to reduce again as soon as we get this done. So stop and wait for me to catch up because I'm sure you guys have already flipped everything over by now, waiting for me because I'm a little slow at this. We're going to reduce on the next step down to only needing 16 sets of bands. Why is it one side always seems to go faster than the other? Okay, so now we're going to reduce. And to reduce, we're going to pick up this peg here that's kind of sticking up and out of the way. Pick up those 2. Place it down on the peg next to it. And pull those 2 bands back over. We're going to do the same thing over here on this side. Pick up those 2 bands. Lay that over the peg. Grab the 2 underneath and fold over. I'm just pushing everything down so I have room for my next set of bands, which will only be 16 bands on this one. So we're going to go around 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. We're going to flip over. Bet you didn't know that making rainbow looms would be so educational. Making a Santa sack, you'd learn how to count. I have to find something funny and entertaining to do. Obviously when you're filming you can't have any background noises or anything. You can't have somebody in the room talking to you while you're trying to do this, so I'm stuck here talking to myself. You guys get the music and the TV and the radio and the dogs barking, and I gotta have it completely quiet. I kick my family members out of the house so there's no other distractions. So there we are back at 16. We're just going to push everything down. And now we're going to reduce again down to 14. So we're going to need to move 2 bands again. I'm going to take these 2 here and I'm just going to place them right there. Then I'm going to peel this part over and flip it in to lock those in. I'm going to take these 2 over here, place them on the pegs, bottom 2 bands, flip over and pull in. And now we're down to 14 bands, and we're actually going to run those 14 around, loop them, and then we're going to cinch our sack shut. Our sack is going to be a little bit shorter than the one that I originally made. I thought it was just a little too fat, so I decided to shrink it up a little bit. I thought it was actually not too fat, I thought it was too long. So once we get done these 14 and flip them over, we're going to take it off the loom and close her up. So with this 14, we're just going to fold those over. And back to this side. Nothing real fancy here. Okay, and then we've got our 14. And our next step is going to be to actually take 2 hooks. We're going to pick up 1 set on one side and 1 set on the other side. So with your 1 hook that you have, reach in and just take off all of those bands on this one side, being careful that they don't fall off the other end down here. And my loom has just come apart. After almost a year of working with this one loom, my pegs have finally got to a point where they won't stay down on their little blue crates so well. I'm struggling to get those 2 and those 2 there. And then our next one, just on any holding hook or another holding device, gather those up. And here we have something that looks very similar to the witch's cauldron, but we are going to cinch this shut. I'm just giving a little stretch and tug just a little bit to kind of get things going where I want them to be. We're going to cinch this shut, and to do that I want you to take 2 green bands and we're going to slip knot them together, and then a 3rd green band and slip knot that to the other 2, and then we're just going to take one side, we're going to pull through. Actually, if you want to slide the 1 band on here just to hold it, and then take this band and we're going to pull that over. You're just taking your extra 2 loops that you come to and you're just pulling that through. And there we go. So that side is done, and just give it a little tug there. Now we can work on the other side, removing the 1 hook, and we're just going to do the same thing. Just slide those 2 bands of each one of those loops over. Missed one on that one. And now I've reached my end. And at the end, we're just going to cinch it tight, tighten it up, and just very simply tie off our knot right here. Double tie it in a knot. Hide that back up inside the bag. And you can do that in any spot you wish. Just pull it back up in there. And here we have our adorable little Santa sack with one little modification we have left to do on it. We need to do our band around here. And for that band, I took actually 4 gray rubber bands, and we're going to slip knot those together to form a continual set of bands. Just simply slip knotting it together and link up those 4 bands. And then very similar to what we did at the bottom, you're going to take 2 loops from the top here, just 2 of those gray loops from each one of the links you come to. Doesn't really matter which 2 you get, just as long as there are 2 grays in each set. I grab one off of each side. Doesn't matter if it's the one on the top or the bottom. And I will not be able to make it all the way around, so I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to just pull this through, holding on to a spot at the lower back. Use my pinky just to do that. Hold it and pull this through all of those. And then we can come back here again and we can start to go through a couple more. Just grabbing 2 bands out of each one of those links. And then we're going to pull that piece through the rest of the way there. And we still have a little bit more that we need to do. So for that, we're just going to continue to reach in over here, grabbing 2 links, 2 links, 2 links, 1 and 2. Finish pulling that little piece of gray through. And then here we've got our bag that we can just tie. I just simply did another tie right there and left it kind of hanging as a bow. Kind of looks like a cute little bow when you're done. So there we've got our bag, and we're ready to fill up with our little boat and our little bear and a baseball bat and glove and a little duck. And I have some other things on my channel also. You could probably use those to fill this up with, but fill up your little Santa sack and place it in your sled and you are good to go. Thanks guys so much, and I hope you will stay tuned for some other great projects that I have coming up in the future.